Welcome, everybody, to the show. This is Counterclipping show number 199 for November 25th, 2024. And I'd like to thank everybody for stopping out tonight. We're going to talk about science fiction war games. And I have a selection of 22, along with a couple that we might consider honorable mentions. I was positive that I had done this topic before, but that turns out not to be the case. So we will talk about science fiction war games tonight. Although we have certainly mentioned our share in passing, and you can guess what a couple of the games that we'll be mentioning this evening are. So we are drinking, I don't have the bottle out, but we are drinking Lefroy Quarter Cask, which is one of my favorites, and the bottle has very little left in it, so I'm kind of trying to kill it at this point. But I'm not sure I'm going to get that done tonight. We are clipping Advanced Pacific Theater of Operations from Decision Games. This is the second to last counter sheet that I'm working on right now. I should be able to finish all of the units tonight. No, I didn't include any miniatures games on this list tonight that were like straight miniatures games. A couple of them do have little plastic models in them, however, and we'll talk about that in just a couple of minutes. Where are all of the screens that I need for this show? That would be great. All right, so before we get going any further, let me remind everybody, please do thumbs up the video. Please do subscribe to the channel or follow if you're over on Twitch or whatever happens on whatever platform you're on. And there are a bunch of ways to help support the show in the video description, as well as super chats and super stickers being on, both of which are a pretty good way to get your comment highlighted, so I will respond to it. Because otherwise we are going to have too many people in here for me to actually respond to. Well, I will miss stuff. Let me put it that way. I will not miss a super chat or a super stickered comment. So big shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, which reminds me to put the ticker up. But of course, I didn't fix the ticker. So I will just say, I'll put the ticker up, but because it's got my email address in it, just in case anybody wants to get a hold of me. But let me give a special shout out to Carl Deckard, who stepped up as our new swordsman level patron, and to Tom Willozin. Tom, hopefully I'm not getting that terribly wrong, who has upped his support to the swordsman level as well. I apologize if I missed anybody there. But the notifications that if I have a complaint about Patreon, it is the slipdosh notifications that they send me. So anyway, let's say hello before we get any further here to Albrecht Zimmerite. Welcome to the show. Achilles, Alistair Logie, B. Goebel, Bill Simone, Board Gaming Geezer, Bob Kowalczyk, Chad Kennedy, Chet Bell, Chris Japp, Christoph DeClerc, Dale Brady, Daniel Silverthorne, Danny Seckery, Dave Poirier, David Imperato, David Zell, DJ Flippy, E4 Airman, Ed Holtzman, Eric Goebold, Garrison Venn, Iggy Cricktal, HUN644 knew the legend himself, fucko, is here. Jeff Anderson, Jeff Beeler, Jeff Edwards, Joe Faust from sunny Northeast Ohio. Not very sunny here today. Joe Hammond, Joe Okabayashi, Joe Mentum, Jonathan Dyer, Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp, Kyle Harris, Lee Grant, Marty Sample is here, Matt Van Wielden, Meandering Mike, Michael Simon, MIDI Doctors, Mike Reed, P51D Fan, Panzer Division, Lair, Powell Dangle, Paw Paw, Perry Sprapolis, Ray Garby, Rob Johnson, Robert Maxey, Sean Sullivan, Sofa Kings, the Stacking Limit is here, Stuka Joe, welcome back. One True Phlegm is here, Tim Greenhaw, Tim Zales, Todd Cox, Vicky, welcome back, William Bird, and W. Trollkin. Welcome everybody to the show. I am aware of this. I need to fix this, but it requires me to go in and swap some text out in the plugin for OBS, and I forgot to do that this week. So we have not yet done it yet, if that makes any sense at all. But thank you for the reminder, actually, because I do need to remember to do that, Mike. So anyway, we do have some news tonight. The Armchair Dragoons digital convention is coming up, and if it follows recent years, it will be on Martin Luther King Day weekend in January. That will be another online digital convention. It looks to be a lot of fun. I'm sure I will be participating in some capacity. We will wait to hear about that, but we will hear more about that as it gets closer. We do have the Noble Knight, and big shout out to Noble Knight for being the official sponsor of the Counterclipping show, Destroyers. And today is the last day of their holiday sale for the year, so be aware of that. A lot of stuff is on discount right now, so if you're going to do anything, by buying it at Noble Knight, then today is probably the day. There is, down in the video description, an affiliate link that you can use to help the channel out a little bit. I get a little bit of a kickback in the form of store credit whenever anybody buys anything through the affiliate link. Now, I think I can mention that there will be an additional promotion that won't be, I don't think it's going to be a sale, but it's going to be a good way, and we'll talk about it. I'll have to do a short on it, to be honest, on Friday. I'm not sure what they want me to say today. But for those international customers that are looking for one of the occasional free shipping international, if you meet a certain dollar value, one of those sales is coming up too. So they've done that before, so I don't think I'm like spoiling any corporate secrets by saying that out loud, but that's coming up as well. So bear that all in mind. I think there is basically no chance of me going to Winter Offensive this year, but this is usually the case. This usually is a conflict. So anyway, let's see here. Let's check in the chat to make sure that we have everybody. And the Steam fall sale starts. The one thing that I was looking at was Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. I've got the Kingmaker one, and it's pretty good. But I don't... That's fair enough. I don't think that I've played that much of it, really. I've put probably 4 hours into it or something like that. So buying it when it's not on sale is just not going to happen. But it is on sale right now for like $10, so I'm thinking about that. But if I could also wait for the fall sale this weekend, so that's fine too. There's always a big Steam sale that starts right around Thanksgiving. So Manor Lords actually looks kind of cool. Do I have that? I'm not sure if I have that. Very good. Very good. I actually remember that game, and I've not played it, but I did play the collectible card game version of it, which was not the worst card game that we played back in the collectible card game days. Boom. Path of the Righteous is apparently a big improvement over Kingmaker. That might be... Kingmaker is my favorite of the tabletop campaigns, though, for reasons that I'm not going to go into now. Mark Herman, thanks for stopping by. Good to see you here, Mark. Winter Offensive is a week later due to the inauguration. Oh, well, that's probably not the worst idea I've ever heard. I never know. The whole place might be burnt to the ground by then. Who knows? Anyway, I tried to steer clear of, too much Traveler stuff in this list, by the way. But there's some, go figure. It's just not, I mean, I could have honestly done just Traveler product, to be honest, counting things like Striker, Brilliant Lances, and Striker 2, and all those various, and Battle Rider, which nobody even remembers. Anyway, we do have some news to go through this evening, and that is the GMT monthly update. Let me fix this real quick. All right. So, as usual on this, folks, if you want to read the whole thing, go read the whole thing at gmtgames.com. I am going to hit the highlights here. So, here news from Gene. He's talking about how great it was to be at SD HistCon. I agree with Gene in this respect. It is a great convention. And look at this terrible weather that we all had to deal with the whole time that we were there. Gene also talks here about the wonderful Point Loma seafood, which unless you just don't like seafood, in which case you will not be happy there. Is a wonderful place to eat. Jeff Beeler, I believe it's not on my list, but I believe this to be the case, where it is based on the C.J. Cherry books, none of which I've read. So that is on the list of things to do. So, oh, very good. Very good. Here you go. 2,000 games. Well, I haven't even played 2,000 games on Steam. So check DJ Flippy out here if you like. All right, so there are 2 new P500s this month. We will take a look at those momentarily. There are also 2 reprints. There are charging and shipping. We'll talk about that in a minute, too. However, the immediate charge, which ought to happen tomorrow, is for the last, we say, charge and ship of the year for GMT, which does make a lot of sense with the holidays coming, and that is Wargames According to Mark. If you haven't ordered this, don't be a dummy. Order it now. You're going to want this book, and they're not printing a ton of extras here, so you really do want to get it soon. And it isn't as though it's horrendously expensive. It's $35, which is kind of book price nowadays. I was looking for a fancy copy of Dune to replace my 30-year-old science fiction book club copy, which is still holding together fine, and it's been read half a dozen times. And like new nice versions of Dune cost like $50. So we will be sticking with our current copy of Dune for the time being, at least until I feel like paying that. Anyway, so this is charging tomorrow. So if you haven't ordered this now and you want to do it tonight, that's not the worst idea I've heard all week. All right. 2024 replacement counter sheet is another thing that's coming reasonably soon. That is actually in this charge. So if you order the 2024 counter sheet, you ought to get hit for it tomorrow, is what I'm hearing. So I should be getting hit for both items tomorrow. I banged my knee on the table. All right, GMT talk. That is GMT's podcast and stuff. They've got Ted Racer here, and I see Volko, Dan Bullock, and Joe Schmidt. Mark Herman is here. I can't read this, but Ben Hall is in there, and my eyes are terrible. So check that out. That's on their YouTube channel, as well as whatever podcasting receptacle you are into. So, all right, not there yet. 1867 Big Wyoming. I presume that's an 18XX game. Hammer and Sickle, which looks interesting. Thunder on the Baltic, which looks interesting. Imperial Eagles, Echoes from the Dark, Napoleon in Egypt. I don't know why people are sleeping on Napoleon in Egypt either. It looks pretty cool. And here is the box back for the Bell of Treason. I'm gonna have to scroll up and down through because I'm not going to scroll in and out here. System designer Mark Herman. So this is a related system to both Fort Sumter and Red Flag over Paris is where that's coming from. So at this scale, I think this mechanics set feels like a pretty good engine for this particular topic, which is, the Munich crisis in 1938. So that ought to actually be pretty cool. What do we got here? Awesome team of developers. Marco Petre is doing stuff with GMT now. That's pretty cool. Bruce Mansfield. That's also pretty cool. We've got some new and or updated Vassal modules here. Designer interviews with a variety of different folks. We being Dan and I, of course, talked to Alan Emmerich not too long ago. We got Fred Serval. Into the Greenwood is not one that I'm familiar with. I'll have to investigate that. And some others as well. And then P500 editions. All right. So the two reprints here are a new printing of Border Reavers, which will be its second printing, and a new printing of Navajo Wars, which will be its third printing. I'm actually more inclined to check out Navajo Wars than I was a month ago because I've played Plains Indian Wars, which I realize is not quite the same topic, and it is not the same designer, and it is a different system, but nevertheless, I think it is a good illustration of the fact that a topic like that can, in fact, be pretty viable, as it is, I think, in the case of Plains Indian Wars. And Navajo Wars is well regarded. So the two new games, let's hit these first. So not this. We've already talked about this. Order it or snooze. All right, so the two new games are Microverse. This is a Sam London game, and I'd like to say, Sam, if you're listening, I apologize for calling you Ben at least once to your face at SD HistCon. I'm not sure why it's coming out like that, but it is, so sorry, now I feel stupid. Okay, so what this is a Space 4X game, so it does actually fit tonight's science fiction war game theme. I wouldn't call it a war game. It is very much got Euro mechanics, but it is also emphatically a Space 4X game, which does have some overlap with war games. So if you like, say, Twilight Imperium or Eclipse or a number of other things, I would recommend giving this a look. I think this has a fair chance to be a breakout hit for GMT. This is one that I played at SD HistCon. It's pretty good, and I will be ordering this. You are going to get rather a lot of stuff in the box. I'm not sure what all are pictures here. I can tell you that the pieces that we played with, so if you remember the pictures from last week, none of that was final art. And I'm not sure that this is final art either, but it's all pretty cool. Oh, the witnesses. We saw the witnesses last week, actually, or at the con, I should say. But a cool looking game in terms of components. Even the playtest stuff looked pretty good as far as I'm concerned. Mike Berticelli is the developer for this. So, and in fact, it was Mike who said, hey, you might be into this. And I'm like, okay, what is this? Oh, yeah. And I ended up playing it, and it's pretty cool. So, yeah, this is going to be a winner, I think. It is relatively simple. It is relatively fast playing. The target play time is 15 minutes per player with up to 8 players. So, if you're looking for, I mean, I made the joke, and I'm going to keep saying this, it takes about as much time to play this as it takes to set up Twilight Imperium 3rd edition. A game I like, but it does take a while to set up. So, anyway, and it's doing quite well on the P500. Now, for more history-oriented wargaming, we have the World Crisis. This is the one that's been getting teased in places. This is Bruce Harper's new design on World War I, using engine components from A World at War, as well as Gathering Storm and Storm over Asia. You can't zoom in on this map, but you can do this and open it in a new image, and you will see that this is, I'm not sure how well you can see this at home, but this is a hex map, okay? And there's some counters that look a great deal like World at War counters as well. So this is going to be a pretty interesting design, I think, just based on what I'm reading here, even aside from the fact that I like World at War, and I think you could adapt that engine to World War I without too much trouble. Right. Well, I don't want to trivialize that. There's definitely some challenges there, but this looks pretty interesting. Well, we'll see. We'll see what this rulebook lands at, right? I don't be shocked if it ends up with a little more than this. But A World at War is, I mean, I've talked about this before, is a little bit less complicated than people tend to think it is based on the size of the rulebook. I'm not saying it's a simple game, but it is less complicated than people think it is. So, all right. So this is pretty interesting too, and it's also doing pretty well on P500 considering it's been less. This has been up for less than a week at this point. So keep your eyes on this too. I am almost definitely an orderee of this as well. Just to say that. All right. So we've talked about the new P500s. And the reprints. There are 4 things that have been removed from P500 this month. Those include Hannibal's Revenge and No Retreat 2 North Africa, which would have been a second printing, and No Retreat 5 The Western Front. And I'm not sure what the background is, why these got pulled exactly. I don't remember what their numbers were as of last month. So I can tell you that the No Retreat games are Carl parody games, and Carl is not stopping, so I'm not sure where these will end up, but I am reasonably confident that the No Retreat games at least will end up somewhere else. Hannibal's Revenge, I'm just not sure what happened to that. Carl Fung, thanks for stopping by. All right. New P500 games on the horizon. We have a new series game with battles set in the War of Breton Succession. I think we talked about this in the past and have determined that that is going to be the next Men of Iron game. We have a new expansion from Ted Racer. I expect that to be an expansion. Nobody's told me this. I would be a little surprised if that was not an expansion for I, Napoleon. A historical strategy game set in the American West in the 1800s. That could be any number of things. I have no idea. And a game featuring conflict in Vietnam. That, again, I'm not sure what that is. Kevin Featherly got a chance to play Fort Circle's upcoming first Monday in October game on the U.S. Supreme Court. You struggle to influence the court's philosophical tilt. This sounds potentially interesting, and Fort Circle in general does very well with that kind of game, so I will definitely keep an eye on that. So they've got a number of very interesting. They've got a Shakespeare game, that Shakespeare's First Folio, coming out as well. And I don't remember what the story is, but there's a story about why they're publishing it, and it's actually a pretty interesting justification for doing that. Yeah, but I could see room for expansion in I, Napoleon. Just adding more events might be good. Hey, I could be wrong too. So I think that's going to be an expansion for I, Napoleon. That's my guess, like I said. And check out the interview we did with Ted a couple of months ago. He talked about potential for expansion in that interview. All right, so we've got a bunch of conventions, including MDG24, the online wargaming convention organized by Mesa de Guerra. Not sure where that is based out of, but it's online, so it doesn't matter. Cascade Con in Bellingham, Washington. So that is in the general vicinity of Seattle. The Spring 2025, meaning April, weekend at the warehouse. That is in April for anybody who's planning on going to that. We have GMT East, which is that, I'm confused. Weekend at the warehouse, April 24th. Are GMT East and weekend at the warehouse on the same weekend? Maybe that's not a problem. I don't know. In any case, all these events. Here is Candace Harris teaching how to play Border Reavers, which I have not played. Designer Diaries for Lennon's Legacy and Red Dust Rebellion. Red Dust Rebellion is out. Rally the Troops has added Washington's War. I think that happened a couple of weeks ago, actually, if not a couple of months ago. A variety of things from Hexasim and Shakos are now sold by GMT, so you don't have to order from offshore to get them. Roger McGowan's book is available through GMT as well. I think you can still get them from Roger, but you can also get them from GMT, and that's cool. It is a wonderful book. Check out the video I did on it. Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the case, but I'm sure people come out from the East Coast to go to Weekend at the Warehouse too, you know, or vice versa. Anyway, still haven't ordered my Combat Commander throw. I got to do that. All right, got a full review for Rebel Fury, some stuff for Red Dust Redemption, and I Napoleon here from Board Gaming Chronicle. They're doing really good work over there. Oh, let's see, what else do we have? I think we're just looking for this. All right, so. Shipping began last week for Commands and Colors Medieval Expansion #1, Come Sharia second printing, Holland 44 second printing, the mounted map for that, and Wolfpack. I think that's actually more than last week. That's like a couple of weeks ago. There were definitely copies of Wolfpack on tables at SD HistCon, and I don't think GMT or Mike brought them all. So in any case, they got the one item. Yeah, okay, so there's one item that's charging tomorrow. I know this says Tuesday, November 22nd, but I think they changed their minds since that, I believe, I think it's tomorrow, I think. Unless I've already been charged for it and didn't notice, which stranger things have happened. All right, next shipment will be in January. Next charge will be in January, and probably shipping as well. That includes the 2024 replacement counter sheet, a Jest of Robin Hood second printing, Congress of Vienna, which was on a table at SD HistCon, and which I am interested in, Downfall second printing, the Downfall mounted maps, and the 3-inch box, Fields of Fire Deluxe, and its update kit. I am on the hook only for the counter sheet there, but I probably should just order Congress of Vienna and suck it up. And then they don't have anything else here. The production outlook. They've got the overhaul of the production forecast. So let's take a look at this. So Marty's been going for 25 years. Don't recall West Coasters attending. Hey, what do I know? I've never been there. So hey, like I said, maybe it's no big deal. All right. This would actually be funny. I actually wouldn't mind trying acquire. I do have an old 3M version of it, which I got at a Goodwill for like $2, and shockingly, it does have all the pieces. Not that there's that much in there. I would support this idea, and I will volunteer Akron, Ohio, to be the host city for this event. Anyway, all right. So we've got a completely different outlook on production here from what we used to get from GMT. So shipping to customers now are the 5 things that I just mentioned, and shipping very shortly is Mark's book. And then late to early December is this stuff. It's going to ship in late to early December from the printer, and we'll charge and ship in January, the other stuff that we just mentioned. Now, the next shipment will be February, and it includes The World at War 4th printing, the mounted maps for that. I'm not sure why anybody needs that, but whatever. The World at War 2024 supplemental counter sheet, which we might as well have a quick look at. The next Fighting Formations game on the U.S. 29th Infantry, and the Battle for Normandy Deluxe Edition, which I am 100% on the hook for. So this is the supplemental counter sheet. It's a half counter sheet, and it just includes like some generic stuff and some new fuel markers and a few other things. There might be some errata on here too. I'm not sure. So I don't know that anybody should get incredibly excited about this expansion counter sheet for a World at War, but if you play World at War, you do want it. All right, at the printer, but with no ship date yet, includes Hoplite, In the Shadows, which is that game about the French resistance, and By Swords and Bayonet from our very own Stigler. So can't wait to see that. Going to the printer late this month or early December is The Last 100 Yards, next volume. And then in final art and proofing. So looking like December, American Revolution Tri-Pack number 2, which I am ordering. The Bell of Treason, which we just talked about up thread, and Thunderbolt, both versions of Thunderbolt. So I suppose this is true. So, and we didn't stop at the National World War I Museum when we went to through Kansas City, which was dumb on our part. Anyway, all right. In final art and proofing, there's a lot of stuff here. This includes China's War. This is a coin game that's been cooking for a good long time. A pile of command and combat commander stuff, including the Europe and Mediterranean 20th Anniversary Edition, which combines the 2 core games into 1 core game. The Minor Nations Battle Pack. There are separate orders for the Europe and Mediterranean one if you want those. There's Combat Commander Resistance as well. Cross Bronx Expressway, Mr. President 2nd Edition, and an update kit for that, which includes a lot of what's in the game. Next War Taiwan 2nd Edition, North Africa 40, which is the expansion for North Africa 41. Seljuk Byzantium Besiege, that's just a guards game. It looks very promising, designed on the Levian campaign engine. 3rd printing of Silent Victory, a 5th printing of Space Empires 4X, which might be on a list tonight, as well as second or third printings, or first printings of all 3 expansions, including the new one. Talon 3rd printing, the Hunters 4th printing, the Plum Island Horror expansion, the Pure Land Unconditional Surrender 3rd printing. Now, what GMT is saying here is that right now, this kind of looks like first quarter of 2025. And if you spread this out, it doesn't seem completely bananas. Cross Bronx Expressway hasn't been in there. I'm not sure where it's been, but it hasn't been cooking that long compared to some of this other stuff. They should really keep a decent chunk of the Combat Commander stuff in print based on how popular it is. So that's a lot of stuff. And then in Q2 and beyond, we have 1833 NE, I think that's another 18XX game. 1848, The Springtime of Nations, that is not an 18XX game, and I am interested in that. A House Divided Designer Edition, based on where I think that's at. I think Q2 2025 is incredibly optimistic. I think Q2 2026 might be closer to accurate. But hey, I could be wrong, and I would be happy to be wrong. Baltic Empires, Barbarossa Army Group North, lots of us have been waiting a long time for that. Bear Trap, we've designed with a designer interview on that. Commands and Killers Ancients expansion number 5, Epic Ancients 2, 2nd printing, and finally the Grand Battles thing that we've been waiting for years on. Cuba Libre Bot update pack, Cuius Regio expansion or extinction. If you'll recall, this is the Space 4X version of Triumph and Tragedy. I am interested. I'm not sold on it yet, but I am very interested in seeing that. This is exactly my thinking. It's a super interesting. The Revolutions of 1848 are a very interesting topic, and I'm very interested in seeing what is done with that game. Where did we leave off? Henry, which is another Levian campaign game. Hubris, that is Morgan's game. That looks very promising as well. That is about the successors to Alexander's empire. Infernal Machine, which is what, I was like, I'm not interested in that. And then I looked at it, I'm like, this actually sounds pretty neat. Italy 43 from Mark Simonich, that's a must-buy. Men of Iron Tri-Pack, 2nd printing. If you don't have that, you should buy it this time. No Retreat, the Russian Front, Deluxe Edition, 3rd printing. So that is the one No Retreat game that isn't getting rehomed, let me put it that way. So Where did we leave off? Tank Duel Tank Pack number 2. Battleships. The Weimar Republic, which is going to be interesting to compare to the one from Capstone. 3 Days of Gettysburg Deluxe Twilight Struggle 20th Anniversary Hall of Fame Edition. It's going to be like 22th anniversary by the time it comes out. And Zhenghe and Zhizhka. So all this stuff looks pretty cool. The Albrecht. So I've actually played that. I wouldn't say I completely got it, but it's got a really very interesting mechanics for like searches and hidden units. I think it is worth a look for that alone. Be aware that it is essentially unplayable as a solitaire experience. So there's that. All right, so I wasted us. Let's get some water and some whiskey, and then off to the topic we shall go. All right. And there might, as Patchwork Pictures mentions, there may be some playthrough on YouTube that I have not watched anytime recently. My typical approach to rules learning is just to kind of throw the game down on a table and start fiddling with it and figure it out as I go. I don't make any claims that is going to work for everybody or is at all efficient, but that is what seems to work pretty. All right, sorry about that, folks. We had a computer crash. So, anyway, did I miss anything important here? No, Dave, we do not. Thank you. Anyway, I got to get this computer into the shop, actually. I can run the show off the laptop. That's not a problem. I believe it to be a processor issue at this point. So the right thing to do is, while it is still under warranty, get it into Micro Center and have them do whatever they need to do with it. So in any case, oh, very nice. Jonathan Dyer has acquired copies of Glory 3 and Wilson's Creek from S&T, which is pretty cool. In this particular case, this is not Windows. I'm reasonably sure. We do not need Dan on the show. I agree. So, all right. So anyway, I don't remember where I was when we were talking before. Since it took a moment to the ticker runs through StreamYard, so the ticker won't stop. I don't run the ticker locally. In any case, Atlantic Chase is another one that's a really interesting game to check out if you're interested in kind of naval searches and hidden stuff and things like that. It has a very interesting mechanism by which to handle, very abstract, and some people don't like that, but it is nevertheless an interesting and innovative mechanism for handling that kind of situation. So, and when Jeremy has Pacific Chase ready to go, I'm sure we will have a chat with him about it. He was supposed to have been at SD Hist, but did not make it for, I think, some kind of reason. I don't know what the reason was. A number of people didn't show. So, all right. So let's get to tonight's topic. And what are we going to handle first? I think I need to pull this up first, because it is the oldest of the games that we will be discussing this evening. All right, let's fix this and that. And then let's zoom in a bit so that we can see Revolution Game Sale, folks. 50% off. Buy one, get one, 50% off anyway. So if you're interested in anything from them, and you should be, they've got some interesting things, then give that a look as well. And we've got a lot more destroyers here. All right, so the first game on the list is one that I have not I've seen it on a shelf, but I've never played it. Even though I have read the books, and these appear to be somewhat tenuously connected to the books, and I'll talk about that in a second. This is Phil Pritchard's Lensman, originally self-published in 1969, but there have been several additional editions of it, not all of which are shown here. There's at least one subsequent edition of this that comes between 2010 and 1969. I know because I remember seeing it on shelves in the 90s. So, and that's not on here, but that's just BGG being incomplete. So this is somewhat tenuously, and I don't think it's licensed in any way. All right, I'm not sure what happened there, and which is entertaining if dated. But this is a space exploration and battle game of some kind. So hopefully we're okay now. I think that was just a momentary freeze, and that might have been StreamYard. If anybody's curious about this webpage, no, it goes nowhere. So you can see the counters. The counters are interesting looking, and this is probably the 20 see, this says 2009. This has like names from classic science fiction all over it, but I wouldn't take that too seriously. This is a map section from one of the versions of the game. It's not this one's not too bad looking. So this is one of the maps to Lensman. I haven't no, this is it. That's not what it is, Jeff. I'm positive. Let me put it that way. So, Phil Pritchard's Lensman. It's an interesting game. If anybody's played it, I'd be curious to know how it is. It doesn't even have rating. I mean, it's not ranked on BGG, presumably because there's not enough ratings of it. There's only 12 ratings, but the people who played it appear to have liked it. So there's that. In any case, this goes for slightly higher prices. By the way, speaking of Noble Knight, we are going to have a new Noble Knight campaign. I was actually going to announce that this week. I will announce it next week instead. I'm pretty sure I know what it's going to be at this point, and it will be for show 200. And we will also have at least a giveaway, if not multiple giveaways, for next week. I'm gonna shoot for more than one. So, in any case, interesting looking game from a history of science fiction wargames type of perspective. For 1969, I would think it's dated, but hey, who knows? Who knows? I'm also real curious as to what extent this lives inside the Lensman background. There have been official game products released for that universe, but the only one I can think of off the top of my head, there's an anime which was licensed, but the estate was very unhappy with it. And it doesn't have a whole lot to do with the books at all. And it actually, yeah, it kind of does remind you of the Stellar Conquest map a little bit if you look at this. I mean, it's space, right? So they're going to share a color palette. But the only like licensed thing I can think of for Lensman is the GURPS Lensman book, which was excellent. But there you go. All right, so next up, we're going to hit an all-time classic. This is Dune originally from Avalon Hill, now available through Gale Force 9, I think. I've got that edition, the Gale Force 9 edition, and it's really nice. The game is identical to the original Avalon Hill game. Now, this was designed by the same team that designed Cosmic Encounter, and it is it is not particularly similar to Cosmic Encounter in any specific mechanics, but there is a bit of a shared approach in that both of those games are designed sort of around, you've got factions in the game. Cosmic Encounter, if you had all the expansions, had 1 million factions. And each of them had a special rule that let them break the rules somehow. And this game works like that. So you've got 6 factions in the core game. If you get expansions, there can be more. You've got 6 expansions, and so there's like the Harkonnens and the Atreides and the Emperor and the Bene Gesserit and the Guild and the Fremen, I believe. And each of those have special things that they can do. The Atreides player, because Paul has so limited prescience, can look and see what card is about to get drawn, for example. The Bene Gesserit have maybe the most interesting victory condition in all games of any kind. And as Jeff Beeler mentions, it is that they can guess the turn and faction of victory, and if that's what happens, then the Bene Gesserit player wins instead. That is pretty really interesting and really hard to do. But all the factions have their own different unique things. Now, there are some issues with it that date, because this is a game that was designed in the 70s, right? It can take a while to play, but unlike a bunch of these Avalon Hill and similar games that take a while to play, sometimes this does and sometimes this doesn't. Sometimes this is over in less than an hour. Sometimes you might go 6 or 7 hours before a victor emerges. So when we say the new Dune, I'm going to assume that we're talking about either Dune Imperium or the new Dune Imperium Spice Wars or whatever that thing's called. Plus, there's another Dune board game that's something along the lines of War of the Ring type of thing, and that looks intriguing, but there you go. There you go. It does happen, right? It's just hard. You gotta, if the Bene Gesserit come to you early in the game looking for a dual alliance to win the game, you be very careful. Let me put it that way. So, but it's an awesome game. The one thing is that you really do want 6 people to play this. You could probably, it'll probably work with 4. It's not a hard requirement. 2 to 6 players, I would never consider playing this with 2 people or even 3. I think that you want to play this with an absolute minimum of 4 players, which, like many multiplayer games, makes it kind of hard to arrange a game of, because you need all those people sitting around the same table at the same time. So, all right. So let me kind of catch up on this. All right, so W. Trollkin, to my knowledge, Avalon Hill's printing of this is the first version, although there might have been I would assume there were prototypes floating around. I haven't watched a Dune Prophecy yet, because I'm not subscribed to whatever the hell it's called now. I will definitely check it out at some point. As mentioned, this was in IP rights limbo for a long time, and for part of that time, the only way you could get it was the French version from Descartes, which was a very nicely produced edition, but it was in French, and you could live with it, right? There's not a lot of instructions on the card, so as long as you know how to play the game, you could get by with the pieces being in French. And Avalon Hill did a couple expansions, and Gale Force 9 has done at least 1 expansion for it. I'm pretty sure I have it. I liked the Dune movies a lot, but the new ones, that is. But I liked the David Lynch movie too, so there you go. New Dune movies are definitely in a different aesthetic than the 1984 David Lynch film. There is no question about that. I like both, so I have a lot of fondness for the movie. I did read the book before seeing the movie, so I read the movie probably around 1984, 1985. I did not see the movie in the theater. I saw it on cable TV when it came out on cable. So, Neil Badkey, I want to say that what you are talking about is in fact the edition of this game from Gale Force 9, and it came out around the time of the movie, but I'm not sure which came exactly first, but it's roughly around that time. Mike Reed says Dune War for Arrakis. That's right, and I hear it's good, but I haven't played it, so there you go. There is also a Steam implementation of Dune Imperium, which is the new, much more Euro-y. So for clarity, I don't consider this a war game, but it's an honorary war game because Avalon Hill published it. And there is kind of a military aspect. The new Dune Imperium is much more of a Euro-y style game. I hear that the Steam implementation is really good, and I should probably check that out. Now, while this was cooking in IP limbo hell, as somebody mentioned, and I here it is, Carl Crater from the Wargame Bootcamp. They basically took this game and redesigned it to fit into the Twilight Imperium universe. That game is called Rex. And I tried to get into that game for years, and I could not get into that game at Origins because it was always full. But now I have this thing, and I've played this, and it is terrific. So I'd always heard it was good. Rebel Moon was pretty lousy as far as that I watched. Maybe it got good after half an hour. I don't know. I mean, this would be cool, but there's been Ringworld projects in the works for decades at this point. So, Mark says that War for Arrakis is quite good. Yeah, I think it's the same people. So, there you go. Rex Final Days of the Empire came out in 2012. There you go, for Meandering Mike. I never had Rex. It was just something I never bought. And I'm kind of glad I didn't buy it, because I think the implementation here is really good. And I've always found the Twilight Imperium universe, although it's fine for the board game, to be fairly bland. So that's, maybe that's just me. Next up is, in fact, Twilight Imperium. All the tabs have to reload here, folks, because the computer crashed. All right, so this is sometimes called a Space 4X game, but I don't think it is. I think it's a 3X game, because I don't really feel like there's much of an exploration element to it. There is more of an exploration element in the later versions of the game, but it doesn't change that much. Now, what's pictured here is the first edition. I have played I have not played the current fourth edition of Twilight Imperium. I have owned and have played all three previous editions of the game. And it takes a long time to set it up, and it takes quite a while to play. And I reliably play this. I like this game, but I reliably play this like every 10 years. Now, would I consider this a war game? Yeah, I would. As you start to get into the later editions, you start to see more Euro mechanics for certain things. But I think at heart, this is functionally a strategic level space war game. And everything else is kind of chrome tacked onto that. Amoeba Wars. That's an interesting one. You know what, though? These older ones, I'm trying to remember. Yeah, I think the first edition came with counters, and the second edition came with the plastic It was when they introduced the plastic miniatures. And it had a more fixed map too than the current version, which has the hex deck. Well, not just the current version, but I think up through second edition it had the hexagonal tiles. So Car Wars is absolutely sci-fi, but I did not include it on this list. So the only one I have is the third edition, and I probably should dump it and get the fourth edition. I understand it is improved. So They have done a number of Twilight Imperium universe games, including Rex, which we've already mentioned, and Twilight Inscription, which is a Twilight Imperium roll and write game. I'm not sure what that means, but it's, I would try it if somebody brought it over. Ugly Green Things from Outer Space. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I seem to remember this. You're right. I think you had to buy like 2 expansions to get all the plastic miniatures, and they were that really rotten, soft plastic that nobody likes. But good game. 6.6 rating here on BGG. I don't know. I like it better than that. I think I'd probably give it a 7 out of 10 CVL. But this is definitely a fun game, depending on which edition you want to play. Like I said, I would. Yeah, it's just something on the counter. It's not torn. I thought it was torn for a second. All right. I didn't include any of the GW branded stuff in here, even though a bunch of it certainly ought to qualify. All right. Next up is Starfleet Battles. This is a classic game that is still around today in a very different player environment than it used to have. Used to be there were a lot of in-person tournaments. There was a huge tournament at Origins that drew like a couple of hundred people every year. None of that's going on now. But nevertheless, people are still playing Starfleet Battles, and I've played it relatively recently. I've played it this year. Let me put it that way. Starfleet, this is, I want to say this is the original edition. So back in the... Let me pull up a couple of these things here. Steve Cole is pretty much the main mastermind, Mo from Mo's Game Table, behind Starfleet Battles and Amarillo Design Bureau and all that other stuff. So this is like the original pocket version of this game, and this got a million expansions. Back in the early 80s, this says 83, we started to see what is now called, at least, I'm not sure if it was at the time, because I never had any of these, the Commander's Edition, where there were 3 box sets, Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3. And you only needed the first one to start with, I think. But as you added additional stuff to it, you got more ships and more interstellar nations and all this other stuff. No, I didn't, Greg, but I will end up playing that. Now, these boxes, though, in the Commander's Edition were these kind of full-size boxes that looked a lot like an Avalon Hill box, okay? And this, at this point, was Task Force Games. And yeah, I saw this actually when I was looking at stuff for a potential target, but I don't want all this old Starfleet Battle stuff. I'm happy to buy the occasional new thing. There are all kinds of cheesy tactics that are available to you in Starfleet Battles, I will tell you. So after the Commander's Edition, we got this. This says 1979. This is like the later early version. And then the current edition is what's called the Captain's Edition. Now, if you're interested in Starfleet Battles, and there is an alternative to Starfleet Battles that I'll talk about in a moment, this is sort of the core game is in 2 box sets. This basic set and a second box set called Advanced Missions. But if you want like all the interstellar powers and all the extra ships and all the other stuff, then you've got to buy a whole host of additional material. That said, there's plenty to do just in this core box, okay? But you probably do want Advanced Missions unless you are going to be very unserious about Starfleet Battles, at least. I have, and I've made a point to not like buy all this stuff again. And notice I said again. I've got the basic set and Advanced Missions, and I'm cool with that. And I got one other thing that I stumbled across somewhere. I'm not sure it came stuck in another box or something like that. There are tons of scenarios in general, not all of which are fighting scenarios. Some of them, there are race scenarios and all kinds of other cool things. There are race scenarios with combat in them. So I've got this. It's pretty neat. But Starfleet Battles, it remains a classic today. However, let's say that you don't want to deal with the minutia of Starfleet Battles, but you like the idea. Well, then, Federation Commander may be for you. This is kind of a very streamlined version of Starfleet Battles. It is its own thing. It is not a Starfleet Battles starter kit. But it is greatly streamlined and with a significantly less overhead than Starfleet Battles has. The components are also significantly upgraded. So, for example, you get full color cards and you get the ships. I'm not sure if they're called SSDs in Federation Commander or not, but they're basically SSDs. But there's color coding on them and they're laminated so you can write on them with dry erase markers. It is a pretty nice package. The counters are real big. It's a pretty nice package. And I would consider playing this. And I had actually signed up to play this at Origins one year, and I didn't because the people running the table were not cool people. So that's not necessarily anybody affiliated with the game. That's just the person I had a bad experience with. So there's that. I vaguely remember this. Now, if you decide tactical engagements between Star Trek starships is not my bag, but I would love to have a strategic approach to this topic, well, Federation and Empire is pretty strategic, but it's also pretty operational. Because you can simulate the entire war between all, like the world war of the whole galaxy is called the General War in the Starfleet universe. And there are scenarios in here where you could play part of it or the whole thing or specific sectors of it or the General War during different periods, plus a bunch of additional scenarios for other conflicts. I got to play this for the first time in a long time, the first time after having wanted to play it for like literally decades. And it's pretty neat. However, if you have an aversion to paperwork or a lot of minutia, you are probably going to bounce off this game fairly hard. I think it is fair to categorize this as a lifestyle type of game. But I do know people who both play this and play other stuff. But I also like the Kzinti. My favorites were the Gorn and the Kzinti. So, you really do have you got like a whole wargaming life in this Starfleet Battles stuff if you want. Mean Joe Green. All right. So off the top of my head, I want to say Game Science had one back in the late 70s or very early 80s. That was the very first licensed role-playing game. There have been a couple of unofficial, unlicensed things. I think one of those was from Game Science as well. FASA had it for a while, with their pretty well-remembered Star Trek RPG, which has some pretty cool things about it. Last Unicorn had it for a while, and like other Last Unicorn products, it was a very crass money grab. It went through Decipher for a while, and I never looked at that edition. And it is currently with Modiphius. I am not sure if I'm missing a Star Trek licensee or not, but that's about it. So there's a story behind this. Larry Niven wrote an episode of Star Trek the Animated Series featuring the Kzinti. And the animated series is now considered canon. So that's why we got a side reference from Riker in Picard Season 1 about the Kzinti. So Gorn were built around large, heavy ships that could take a lot of damage. So... see, this does not seem terribly practical to me. The idea of playing Fed and Empire is enough overhead by itself. To then say we're going to play the battles out in Starfleet Battles seems crazy. Plus, it doesn't really work if you think about playing Starfleet Battles. Under no circumstances would I want anybody running more than maybe 3 ships at a time in Starfleet Battles. And you're going to end up with battles in Fed and Empire that have like 30, 40, 50, 80 ships in them. You're not going to be able to run those in anything resembling a reasonable amount of time. So I declare this idea to be cool, but not particularly practical. So, as far as I'm aware, Agray Day, this is just a second edition of the Modiphius Star Trek Adventures RPG, which I do like. Yeah, that's true. There's Star Trek Attack Wing, and there's which is a little miniature space combat thing. There's also Star Trek Ascendancy, I think is what that's called, where it's more like a Space 4X game type of thing. But cool game, and I will be delighted to play it some more. That's likely to happen on Vassal. I strongly recommend Vassal for playing this. Starfleet Battles, not so much, but for Fed and Empire, yeah. All right, next up is the classic Avalon Hill Starship Troopers, designed by Randall Reed, 1976. So this is, of course, based on the Robert Heinlein book. And unlike the movie, it does include both the bugs and the skinnies. And there are like some scenarios, and I think there were probably some additional scenarios that popped up in the general as well. But you never saw like an expansion or anything in this. Here's a fan expansion for War Dogs, I guess. Cool cover, and I think this may have been a cover used for the book at one point as well. And it's not a bad cover. There's a kind of interesting color palette. See if I can get a picture of the map that looks like it covers the whole map. This looks like Vassal to me, but this is basically the map. So it's got a sort of interesting color palette going on here. Okay. Okay, new version of A-grade Star Trek Ascendancy. Okay, that's not one that I'm aware of. I mean, I'm aware of Star Trek Ascendancy, but I'm not aware that there's a new one. I grew up at Thomas Bandy in Lorain County, if you didn't know that. So there you go. Yeah, I think this might have been more interesting, and we'll see a different approach to very similar material in a couple of minutes here. So Starship Troopers, a pretty good game, as I recall. Randy Reed was a pretty good designer in my experience. He designed some things that I think hold up fairly well nowadays. I'm not positive that this is one of them, but there have been another couple of Starship Troopers licensed products, including a miniatures game at one point, which, was based more on the movie than anything else. This is based pretty strictly on the book and predates the movie by at least 15 years, if not 25. So, and it has the power armor too. Yeah, that goes without saying. And expansion general 13, volume 13, number 6. I figured there was some extra stuff for expansions, but BGGs, sometimes they list that stuff and sometimes they don't. In any case, pretty good game. And they managed to get a big license. You notice these big licensees never really show up as like hobby games anymore. As like, they always show up as mass market things now because the licensing has become much too expensive for wargame companies, for example, to be able to do, which is too bad, but there we are. All right. Get rid of that. All right. One of my favorites from SPI, designed by Ired Hardy. This is Outreach. This is sort of the capstone to the Star Force trilogy, which we will be working sort of backwards through here. It is, before we get to Outreach, because I'm going to take a little bit of time on this one, because I've played it and I like it a lot. Let's hear a few brief words from our good friends at Noble Knight Games. So take it away, Noble Knight. We'll be right back.
Here at Noble Knight Games, we've been carefully growing the world's largest selection of board games, role-playing games and dice, war games, miniatures and paints, card games, and more. Going on 25 years now. Our rustic castle contains more game and hobby goodness than you can shake a stick at. Complete with careful packaging and the finest customer service the land can provide. You can buy, sell, trade from anywhere in the world, just like nature intended. Noble Knight Games.
All right, thank you, Noble Knight, for being the official sponsor of the Counter Clipping Show. And folks, don't forget about the affiliate link that's down in the video description if you buy stuff from All right, that was not a crash. That was me hitting the wrong button and dropping the screen. So, folks, remember the Noble Knight affiliate link in the video description. If you use that, I will get a little bit of a kickback in the form of store credit, and we will use that on the next campaign, which I will announce next week on episode number 200. So, it's actually the back button that I used my thumb to hit on the mouse. That's what actually got hit. I set the clipper down and the clipper hit it. That's happened before, actually. The more all the buttons mean more scotch. All right, so Outreach. I think I should actually start this part of the conversation with Starforce, though. All right, so this is the first game. All three of these games were released independently. You didn't have to buy the Starforce trilogy to get them, okay? There are three games that we're talking about here: Starforce, Star Soldier, and Outreach. Starforce is the first one. Now, there's a couple of really interesting things about this game. It's not the most fun game to play, to be frank. I wish this was a possibility. I got to tell you. All right, CVL, CVE. All right. So one of the interesting things about this is that it was designed by Redmond Simonson, but it was designed as an SPI game, right? So it's very much, we're going to take seriously this concept of warfare in the future and develop a serious simulation based on that. And that's exactly what this is. But what it also means is it's a simultaneous hidden movement, and most people don't like that mechanic, right? It's nevertheless pretty cool, and it's got 3D movement too. So yeah, there's a table, so you don't need to use trigonometry here, but it's 3D movement too. So that's actually not on the list either. Believe it or not, it's not on the list. I can't cover everything in one show, folks. So in any case, this is kind of what it sounds like. It's starships fighting other starships. And there are a bunch of different scenarios. I haven't played this since the 80s. But it's a pretty neat game in a lot of ways. It's very interestingly developed. It's like a legitimate attempt to do a science fiction simulation game. And it's designed by Redmond Simonson. And loosely, the other two games in the Starforce trilogy share the setting here, as does Universe, actually. Universe actually brings in some, at least unofficially, some of the ideas from these games as well. And it's actually pretty cool. All right. So we are having some technical difficulties here tonight, folks. That was a Chrome crash. Anyway, this is a pretty cool game. Next up in the sequence was Star Soldier, which is tactical ground combat in the Star Force universe, pretty much. And you got, humans, the Rame, the Lechal Da, and other miscellaneous Xenos here. I didn't really care for this back in the day. I like Starship Troopers a lot better, the board game, that is. This looks like... The boxed version of this, I think, is quite hard to get. I don't see it very often at all. But all three of these games were available in both flats and boxes and in the Star Force trilogy. So none of these are particularly hard to get nowadays, although none of them are exceptionally cheap. The map graphics are bland, as we say. But, I think you could probably, by modern standards, I think the Starship Troopers graphic is sort of bland and pukey looking too. Now, the third game in this series takes place like literally 1,000 years later, like 800 years later, okay? 3000 AD is absolutely a placeholder date. Do not take that very seriously. This is the game of, okay, all that stuff has happened. Now there are a bunch of little wars and this sort of universal Federation type of thing is now expanding out of that original hex into the entire galaxy. The turns in this are generational turns. It's a very high scope game. And if we look at the map, we will see that it is a huge chunk of the Milky Way galaxy. This is an awesome game. There is some paperwork, but it's like less paperwork even than, say, Space Empires 4X, let alone Federation Empire or something like that. There's a chit pull mechanic in here in a way that SPI did reasonably frequently, where you're kind of drawing random events out of a chit cup. The Pan-Sentient League, there you go. And for those who don't know, the 80s new wave band Human League did get their name from these games, from Star Force specifically. They have agreed that is where they got the game. I got mine from eBay in the flat. So I had the Star Force trilogy back in the day, and of the 3 games, Outreach was by far my favorite. I played it a number of times, and I hung on to it until probably 2010 or so, when it was stacked in a basement, and the weather got to it because there was a hole in the wall that was unbeknownst to us. And it got wet and it got moldy. I mean, super moldy, like nasty mold, that will eat human flesh. So it had to be discarded. I have since reacquired both Outreach and Star Soldier. And Outreach was one that I was one of the first things I wanted to rebuy, to be honest. It is a terrific and underappreciated game. Now, only Star Force itself was designed by Redmond Simonson, just to point that out. Star Soldier was designed by Tom Walczyk, and of course Outreach by Irad Hardy. I would kind of like the trilogy, but I've got the 2 games out of it that I like, so it would be kind of just be a shelf ornament to get the trilogy at this point. Unless somebody's got an empty Star Force trilogy box. In that case, look me up. I wouldn't be surprised by this. So let me pull the... So if you look at the map here, you will see that there are 3 W hexes in the middle of the galactic core. And there's a set of, 10 or 12 different wisdom chits. And you draw 3 randomly at the beginning of the game and put them there. And if you make it to the galactic core, you can reveal the wisdom chit. And one of the chits is that the galactic core has exploded. So I'm not sure the game really... I could think of a cooler way to implement that. Let me put it that way, but it would kind of require a whole rule for it, to be honest. This is a really cool game. Decision holds the rights to this now. I'd like to see them redo it. I would like to see a pretty faithful rendition of this game for me to buy it. However, so well, we'll get to metagaming actually. But we've now covered a lot of SPI's science fiction output, but not yet Battlefleet Mars. Brad Hessel, Redmond Simonson gets a credit on this too, but we can actually... I think that's a developer credit. No, game designed by Brad Hessel and Redmond Simonson. For anybody interested, Callendale has some playthrough of Battlefleet Mars. I'm not sure if any of the other ones. It is an intriguing-looking game in a number of ways. There are... Well, there's some counters in here that I don't know what they are. Let me put it that way. Space Corp is a straight Euro, though. I like Space Corp. It's a good game. But it is a straight Euro. And I wanted to stay away from things that are... that more or less fit into that category. I wanted science fiction games that at least have some kind of wargaming element to them, which Battlefleet Mars totally does. The map itself is fairly interesting. You've got like the solar system here, and then you can move around inside the solar system. This looks neat to me. I just acquired this maybe a year ago or so, and I definitely want to play this. Star Trader. I will not include Star Trader because I think reasonably consider Star Trader to be part of the Universe RPG, which it slots into. In fact, my copy of Star Trader, thank you, you know who you are, is in my Universe RPG box. So, and I didn't cover the Renegade Legion stuff either, to be honest. But that's because I never played them. So... I've got Star Trader. Star Trader looks pretty interesting. But I never played Battlefleet Mars. Now, this is a 77, so it's kind of on the early side. It's also very much an oddball because of this map. It's an oversized map, which is not something I really saw out of SPI very often, if ever. So I'm not sure what's up with specific named submarines here, but yeah, this game actually looks pretty interesting too, and I will 100% end up playing this at some point. Now, we talked about Starfleet battles, but there is a smaller and much simpler and much easier to play little brother of Starfleet battles, and that is Starfire. Now, this is, I think, the original version of Starfire. There is a couple of later versions of it. This was put out by Task Force Games, designed by Steve Cole as well. And this kind of condenses Starfleet battles into just like a little one line of text per ship instead of having like a whole display. So I've played it. It's been a long time. It's pretty neat. There was a campaign system in a couple of different versions, one of which was Imperial Starfire, and a later version was Galactic Starfire, which was a really monumentally complicated campaign system, like along the lines of Starfleet battles. There were some really interesting like campaign books put out for this, written by in some cases at least, by David Weber. I may even have a couple of those still sitting around. I think I do. Written at least a couple cases by David Weber, the author of the Honor Harrington sci-fi books. So, to what extent those tie into Starfire, I'm not sure, but he may have recycled material too. I don't know. I thought there was an Honor Harrington space combat game too, and I'm trying to remember who did that. Ad Astra, maybe. Yeah. So very much so. And the other thing is with Starfire, like I said before, if you're playing Starfleet battles, you're probably going to have a lot of difficulty playing more than 2 or 3 ships at a time. Not in this thing. You can easily play 20 ships and you're fine. I don't know if I'd go much higher than that, but it's, there you go. Ad Astra. Thank you. I'm not sure Ken has ever been to the show, so yeah. The vibe is definitely very similar. I've only read the first Honor Harrington book, but the vibe is definitely very serious, but I've never thought that it was the same universe. I don't know that Starfire really has much of a universe. I mean, if you got those campaign books, you got world material, but that's basically it. So now if Weber is like fighting these battles out using Starfire, then that might make sense, actually. He wouldn't be the only person doing something like that. I haven't played this in a long time, but it's pretty neat, pretty slick little game. Now, if we go to Starfire 3rd Edition, Galactic Starfire. Yeah, okay, this is the current one. This is, well, I don't know about current, but latest one. Galactic Starfire 4th Edition from Starfire Design Studio. And there's a re-implementation called Ultra Starfire from 2004. Re-implemented by Solar Starfire. All right, so if you're interested in this, you got to do some research to figure out what to buy. Let me put it that way. So, Red Alert is the Commands and Colors space combat game. I've never played it. I would be shocked if it wasn't good, to be honest. All right, moving along. We have next, and now for something completely different, Joe Miranda's Struggle for the Galactic Empire. One of the cool things about Outreach to me was the scope of it, right? You had literally the entire galaxy was the game. Well, not quite the entire galaxy in the case of Outreach, but it was a huge chunk of the galaxy, and you could just assume that maybe nothing was happening in those other parts that were off the map. Or you could get the fan-made map from BGG and play with the entire galaxy. I am aware of very few games that even pretend to have that kind of scope, other than Outreach. But this is another one. This is Struggle for the Galactic Empire from Decision Games, a 2009 release by designer Joe Miranda. This is a solitaire game. I think you could co-op this reasonably. And basically what's going on here is there's a galactic empire, and it's going to pot. And all these crises are emerging, many of them, some of them trivial, but some of them existential. And the whole confluence of chaos around the galactic empire is itself an existential crisis. This is the most Asimovian approach to a galactic empire that I have seen. Well, other than having some writing for it done by David Weber, sure. I mean, I'm not arguing with this. So, but this is a pretty cool game. Here's the map, and as you can see, there are these sectors, and like different things will like blow up in some particular sector, and you'll have to send a firefighting team out to go fix it. But like the whole empire can also shrivel. There is a chit draw element to this where you're drawing random chits that are the events. This is a pretty neat game in my opinion. And I think the best science... I'm not sure Joe Miranda's done a better science fiction game. Let me put it that way. So, I'm not sure I can name another science fiction game that Joe has done, although that Phobos Rising stuff in the minis and the folios that Decision did, I think those might be tied. Those might have been done by Joe as well. And those kind of tie into this sort of vague science fiction thing that Decision is kind of sort of halfway trying to build. So, very nice. Very nice. Alexander, good luck with this. Hopefully you will enjoy it. All right. Yes, but don't forget that Asimov's original inspiration for the Foundation series was Gibbon's Decline and Fall in the first place. So, this is Struggle for the Galactic Empire. I think there's a digital version of this too that you can get from Decision. But I don't know anything about the digital versions. I don't have any of those. And I am not going to try and... I would be making anything that I had to say about it up. The board game is pretty cool. And it doesn't go for $1 bazillion last I checked. I'm not sure whether it's still in print or not, but it might be. I don't know that it definitively isn't. Not incredibly... Oh, if you can get it from Amazon, then it's presumably in print. And $60 is the approximate retail price. So there you go. So it appears to still be in print. Well, it's Joe Miranda, so that's not one, okay? Joe's done like a lot of games, maybe more war games than anybody else. So, this game, regardless of what Stigler might say about it, I think this is a pretty cool game. I think you could get a lot of enjoyment out of this, and I have long been tempted to do some video playthrough of it, and I've just never gotten a chance to do it. All right, so let's talk about Stellar Conquest. Now, I had the Avalon Hill version of this game, okay? However, that was not the original. The original was released in the little micro box by Metagaming. I guess I'm not sure if it was in the micro box. Not everything that Metagaming did was in the micro box. Hard to say. In any case, as far as I'm aware, it's an identical game either way. So somebody who's played Space Empires 4X would find that this feels extremely similar. So what you get 4 different factions, the 4 colors here, and you get decks of cards for the different star colors, and then when you go explore a star, you draw from that deck, and that tells you what kind of planets are there and what you can do with it. There is, as is often the case with this kind of game, there is some bookkeeping. It's not particularly complicated, but that bookkeeping is the reason why I always had, back in the day, I had trouble talking people into playing this because they didn't like the paperwork. It's not that much paperwork. But, if you just don't want paperwork, then, you're not going to like this. But I like this game quite a bit. I do like Space Empires, I think, a little bit better, to be honest. It's cleaner. There is still paperwork, but there's less paperwork. The paperwork doesn't bother me, though. But I like this game a ton. It's a legit 4X game. There will be conflict in the game. There is exploration. There's a lot of cool things going on in here. What you don't have is that sort of, let's call it an outside context problem, if you know what that is. That Outreach has with the wisdom chits, where something like completely out of left field could hit toward the end of the game and completely change the end game. This doesn't really have anything like that. And it can take probably longer to play than you would necessarily like. But I still like this. There is a computer game version of Struggle for the Galactic Empire. I did say that. God's Fire. Yeah, I vaguely remember God's Fire. That struck me as a fantasy game, though. Stellar Conquest. This is another one that I'm not really sure I need because of Space Empires 4X, which, again, covers much the same ground with somewhat cleaner mechanics than Stellar Conquest did. However, if I was to stumble across this at a garage sale for $10, I would buy it, just for the sake of nostalgia. It is, however, not a particularly pricey game, unless you go to eBay, where they, for some reason, want $80 for it. So you can get a copy of this, and in fact, one of these is the metagaming version, which I've never owned, so... All right. Starfleet Marines and Federation Commander. Good. We did talk about Federation Commander. I think it is a perfectly reasonable alternative to Starfleet Battles. It's just a little easier to, well, not a little, but substantially easier to play, right? Is it? Okay. I'll take your word for this. I remember it only vaguely. So, all right. Next up, we knew this was going to happen. Let's do Blood Tree Rebellion next. So, I picked this up relatively recently, probably about 6 months ago, from our good friends at Noble Knight Games, I think. And this is one of GDW's science fiction games that was not a Traveler tie-in, but in every one of those cases, you can imagine tying this into Traveler with almost no effort whatsoever. In this case, the interesting thing here is it was designed by Lynn Willis, who is more often associated with Chaosium than with Game Designers Workshop. This is a rebellion on an alien planet of some kind. So this is like an insurgency and counterinsurgency type of game. That is what kind of appealed to me to pick it up. Plus, it's a GDW science fiction game, and I've had them all at one point or another, and I believe I have them all again at this point, in one form or another. I'm missing a digest-sized box of Dark Nebula, but I've got the big one, so I don't care too much. Wouldn't mind. Maybe I should check that out. Very good. So, Blood Tree Rebellion. This is 78, 79, and you can see that the counters are very GDW. And also that this looks very asymmetrical. And that is actually what interested me in this. And I would love to talk to, say, Volko or Brian Train to see if this was a game that was on either of their radars, since those are probably the two designers designing most often in like that space in the last 10 years or so. So Blood Tree Rebellion was one that I never owned until this time picking it up. But I did have at one point Triplanetary and Double Star, and got rid of those and never acquired them. So there's that. Speaking of Double Star, here is Double Star. So this is a space combat game set in a Double Star system, which is, I'm not sure. But then you look at the counter sheets and I'm like, holy shit, look at this. So this is like a massive interstellar war between these two stars in this Double Star system. This is actually pretty cool. Imperium's actually not. Triplanetary was the first GDW sci-fi game. And we'll get to that in a minute. But Double Star is pretty interesting looking from this standpoint. You can see here's the other faction, right? There's two full counter sheets here of counters. That's kind of the impression I have, yeah. Is it's kind of like a Vietnam War type of thing, but on a science fiction setting, because it was super fresh at that point. All right. So the first GDW science fiction game released in the year that GDW got started, I think, is Triplanetary, designed by Mark Miller. This co-credits John Harshman. I'm not sure if that's actually accurate or not. I'm not going to go get it off the shelf. So the interesting thing about Triplanetary, and remember this is 1973, is that this, not just gravity, but like Newtonian physics are in play in this game. So here's the game, and you had this, so you'd have ships represented by counters, but even at the beginning, back in the old days, this originally came in a tube, by the way, with a rolled map. And either crayons or grease pencils. And you would draw you'd move your unit according to your thrust, but then you would draw your vector on the map, which might be in a completely different direction. It's a really unique way to handle 3D movement, and one that was later that has been copied here and there by a number of other games, including but not limited to Iron Crown Star Strike. Used a very similar system to this. But yeah, this has gravity in it as well. This is a pretty neat game. One might assume that it is somehow also tied into the E.E. Doc Smith stuff, because there is an E.E. Doc Smith novel called Triplanetary. But as far as I know, this has nothing to do with that, and there's no real background in this at all. This was licensed to Steve Jackson Games forever ago, and they did not actually do their version of it until this third edition came out in 2018 after a Kickstarter. So, some of the Traveler board games would later use something similar, but on a hex map generally, to the way Triplanetary handles vector movement. That's a good point, Drew. No, Double Star also does not have anything to do with Robert Heinlein's novel Double Star. The Heinlein title is actually a play on words if you've read the book. It's an actor who's hired to impersonate a political leader. If you've seen the movie Moon Over Parador with Richard Dreyfuss, I think that sounds right. It's basically that, but in space, but better. So, I would not call High Frontier a spiritual successor to Triplanetary. I think they're very different. All right, folks, that was another computer crash, so bear with me here. We'll get this fixed up. Clearly, we got to get this into the shop. I think I've said about all I can say on the subject of Double Star anyway. All right, there we go. All right, so interesting game. This is one that I have not played. Another one that I have played, though, is Belter, which is not on the list because how much Wargame is in it is a matter of debate. It's really a game about asteroid mining. But I think it is a pretty neat game about asteroid mining, and it's from Game Designers Workshop. And it's another one that you would have basically no trouble adapting to Traveler. All right, so second to last in the GDW sequence is Fifth Frontier War. So this is the war game, and it's fairly photogenic too, I think. So remember how Traveler handles FTL, okay, and then consider where you have a jump drive, you jump, then you spend a week in jump space before emerging out into regular space, however many parsecs away that you jumped. While you're in jump space, you are cut off. You have no idea what's happening in the actual universe at all. And that is built into Fifth Frontier War in a way that a lot of people don't like. Callendale did some video on this too. And I think it's got some issues, and he didn't have a particularly great time with it. I think I'll be happy to buy whatever they would like to do in terms of reprinting old GDW science fiction stuff. Soon they might have to deal with Mongoose for that, though, so just bear that in mind. So there's kind of a semi-simultaneous movement going on here. I can't handle everything, and there's not much point in doing both Imperium and Dark Nebula, and Imperium is next. So, but Fifth Frontier War is, I think, pretty neat. But if you're just like not a Traveler person and are just approaching this as a science fiction board game, you might well play this and say, what the fuck? I don't know. This is totally unenjoyable. I can totally see that. But if you are a Traveler fan and you want to like use this as like a campaign generator for your RPG campaign that's happening right here, then this is an absolutely brilliant game. So it is, it's, take it with a grain of salt. I wouldn't really recommend Fifth Frontier War for anybody except somebody who was very coming up with other stuff either. This is not super duper easy to get, but it doesn't cost $1 million, but it is not incredibly inexpensive either. I do have Still Horizons on the table so far. I've still played about 2 turns of it, so I would agree with Gregory Campagna's statement here. I think you will not generally enjoy Fifth Frontier War without some kind of connection to Traveler. All right, so next, and second to last, is in a way, the game that started Traveler as a universe rather than as an RPG. That the connection between the universe displayed here in Imperium and that being the Traveler universe was not really apparent in 1977. And some of the concepts that eventually made their way into the Traveler universe from the process of developing this game made it into Traveler, but not into this game. So they had a number of science fiction board games in development at GDW, and this was the one that came out of it. So the conceit here is, and I don't think the graphics are going to blow anybody's pants off here, or the counters for that matter, but this is an excellent game. It is pretty straightforward. It's probably got some balance issues. I think that's a fair statement. But this is, I'm not sure I would want to draw too much from this comparison, but you're not exactly wrong here either. So what Imperium is it's like 2300 AD or 2200 AD or something like that, and humanity has finally invented faster than light travel, and they've gone out to the stars only to find that the stars are already claimed by humans. This big interstellar empire is out there. It's been around for thousands of years. Earth is very far from its imperial core, so the Empire, the First Imperium, doesn't take this threat of this planet out in the middle of nowhere very seriously at all. The Terrans are convinced they're fighting for their very survival here. So it's a series of wars with a series of lulls in between them that happen as the Terrans gradually get better and better, and they're more apt to technological innovation than the Imperium is, which is a very stagnant culture. So they invent Jump 2 before the Imperium has it, or maybe it's Jump 3, I forget. And it proves a huge military advantage. And under the strain of this and everything else that's going on, the First Imperium collapses. And the Terrans just kind of race in and take over, and that becomes the Second Imperium, which lasts like 150 years or something like that. And then that collapses. There's a big interstellar dark age, and the third Imperium happens, and that is the Traveler universe. Okay, so it's pretty stag limit. Thanks so much, much appreciated. BattleTech is, of course, worthy of mention. No, they have never published this. There is some material on the internet for this. They called this The Game or The Great Game or something like this. And it was basically like a future history simulator that they used to map out not just 2300 AD, but I think the starting point was actually the Twilight 2000 setting. Okay. And they kind of took it forward from there. And by 2300, you've got the Third French Empire. That is the most powerful country on the planet. But there's also it's not a unipolar situation either. So now there is GDW kind of kept this in print in various editions throughout the lifetime of GDW. After GDW, however, it has only been picked up in a couple of places that I'm aware of. Let me see what BGG has. Now, the one I've got is Imperium Third Millennium from Avalanche Press, which I've played and which incorporates some optional rules that don't really work right. It's got some issues, but I've played it and I don't think it's that bad. You've got these Japanese, and there's a Chinese edition, as I recall. It looks like they're all Japanese. Nope, this is the Chinese edition. You've got these absolutely friggin' gorgeous looking East Asian editions of this. This is a fabulous looking cover here, at least. I like this one too, although, and that's kind of Star Blazers adjacent, right? There is a space BattleTech game. It is called Succession Wars. Terrence Invented Jump 3. There you go. So, here's the another Japanese edition, which is a pretty beat up, but also a pretty nice cover. And here's the Chinese edition, which also looks, it's the same art from the previous Japanese edition. And these are relatively recent, right? If you look at the dates on these things, 2019, GDW's last edition went out of print with GDW, right? I'm not really familiar with that property. I'll take your word for that. But in any case, Imperium is a terrific game. I'd love to see this back in print. I see no reason why this couldn't be reprinted as is tomorrow. And I don't know that anybody else is really doing that. And anybody's really working on that. But there's a bunch of cool looking foreign editions. I mean, if Mongoose wants to do it, let them do it. That's fine. I just would like to see this back in print. I think it's an excellent game. Now, this was originally, though, not actually a GDW release. This was originally published by Conflict Games, which was John Hill, pretty much. And then John Hill, I think, ended up deciding he didn't want to be a publisher anymore. He just wanted to design stuff. And then he basically sold Conflict Games to GDW. So if you've got a Conflict game, it's not even listed here. It might be actually. Yeah, Conflict Games, but this is nice. This says 1977. What I have is this 1979 GDW flat edition. But I have 3 versions of Imperium. I've got the flat version, I've got the bookshelf box version with the puzzle piece board, which I always hate that. And I've got Imperium Third Millennium. So I'm good on copies of Imperium. So, but this is the flat box that DJ Flippy is talking about, is this box cover. The Conflict Games box cover looks identical, except it says Conflict Games instead of Game Designers Workshop. The other cover is this cover from GDW. This is the one that the reprint of it in the Mega Traveler era. It matches the sort of general look and feel of the Mega Traveler product line, because at this point it is firmly part of the Traveler universe. But it didn't start out that way, and you don't really need to know anything about Traveller to enjoy this game. I've given you all the background you needed in that 2 minutes. It is an absolutely terrific game that I would love to see return. Now, there is one more, and we have saved, I think somebody will say, the best for last, baby. Space Empires 4X from GMT. And I guess I like the old cover. I'll show you the old cover, and I'll show you the new cover. This is the original cover. This is a Roger McGowan cover, if I'm not mistaken, and I love this cover. But boy, this is a cool cover, isn't it? This is the new one, and I'm thinking about getting the new one just to get the new box. And I think it's a 4-inch box, too, which would also be nice, because it's very hard to fit all this stuff in this game, in these boxes. This is a marvelous game. Broadly speaking, it is very similar to Stellar Conquest, where you've got a pad to keep track of production and shipbuilding and technology and stuff like that. And there's an exploration element. Almost everything other than that statement about the game is different in execution, but in terms of approach, it's very similar. In terms of what kind of game this is, it's very similar. It is a Space 4X game. All the 4Xs are here. So, the Victory Games Space Empire game. Are we talking about Stellar Horizons 2? Which is sitting out on my table right now. I think that is probably what we're talking about here. And I like that so far, too. Very different from this, though. It's much more sort of grounded in hard science fiction than this. This is very much a space opera game, right? In terms of what kind of science fiction this is. You've got ships. The ships can fight. You've got a lot of different kinds of ships. And again, it's kind of similar to Stellar Conquest in this way, where you gradually you're able to build bigger and bigger ships. Stellar Horizons versus Space Empires. I've got them both. I like them both. They're very different. If I want more or less a pure Space 4X experience, I will go with Space Empires. If I want more of a build your own space program from Earth type of thing, I will play Stellar Horizons. And if I want very early interstellar outreach simulator, I will use Stellar Horizons 2. But I really like Space Empires 4X as well. So I think, any of those games are good. I also have, I didn't list it because I didn't consider it wargaming enough to even include in this list. I do have the second version of Eclipse, which is a straight Euro, but it is a Space 4X Euro, and it's supposed to be really good. And the production is incredibly fancy, but I have not yet actually played it. I've seen way worse than this. This is looks like they did use nail clippers on these, but they were somewhat restrained. I've seen way worse than this. On the one he's holding up, that's a little, but look at this clip right here, right? That's a tiny clip. This is a huge clip. This is why I don't use nail clippers anymore. Thank you, Oregon Laminations. The Doomsday Machine. Yeah, and the other thing is that I think All Good Things is going to have consolidated rule and scenario books, so you're not going to have to leaf through a bunch of different scenario books anymore. There's a million scenarios for this. Including solitaire scenarios and big scenarios and small scenarios and scenarios with more than one set and all kinds of stuff. The problem with this, W. Trolkin, thanks for stopping by, is I don't trust Peterson Games to actually deliver product at this point. That is my concern. The concern I would have with anything that Peterson Games says. So there's that. Not saying a couple of their games I've heard good things about, but I'm not dealing with them. That's for sure. So I feel like I have. If I was to redesign, I'd have to think about that harder. Cholula Sauce. Thanks for stopping by. I assume you're officially representing Cholula Sauce, which is among my favorites. So, but no, a couple of the solitaire scenarios are like Doomsday Machines, where Doomsday Machines pop up and you got to stop them. And of course, they're very hard to spot. So, there you go. There you go. Yeah, not recommended to kickstart any of that stuff, or you'll probably take a bath on it. But this is also a pretty simple game, right? Nobody's going to break their head open on Space Empires 4X. It's easy to play. It's a genuine war game. There's never any question about that. But with the other 3 X's are there for fun. I like this game a ton. I think there is a tenuous connection with the Space Empire's computer game. If at one point, I don't know if this is still true, if you bought this, you got a little flyer in there for the Space Empire's computer game. And I think the games do share some graphics, some icons, but other than that, I don't think they're similar. Well, vaguely they are, because it's also a Space Empire, Space 4X game. There are 3 expansions for this. There is Replicators, which adds a new faction. There is, what's the other one? There's All Good Things, which is the new one, and there's Close Encounters. That's actually the first one. This one, I think, doesn't add a new... I could be wrong about this. Yeah, this doesn't add a new faction. Although Replicators does, and All Good Things will add at least one more. So, Evertel, thanks for stopping by. Good to see you here. I understand that it is late where you are. So, Replicators, yeah, well, if you actually have the game, yeah, but I don't think they leaned on the Stargate stuff particularly heavily. Let me put it that way. But it's a marvelous game, and I'm very, very interested in seeing All Good Things when it does come out, which let's just review that real quick. Master Rulebook and Scenario Books, 2 new factions, variable home systems, which sounds like a cool idea, scenario cards to give you additional scenario flexibility, which the game already has a lot of scenarios. Missions are resource cards, but they're like missions. Deep space planetary attributes. This sounds like it might be particularly interesting. 2 new facilities and extras of basically everything. So cool game, cool cover on All Good Things as well. I think this comes in a 4-inch box too, by the way. So if I had 2 4-inch boxes, I might be able to get all of the game into them, but maybe not. I could use an extra board for bigger games. But this is a cool game. So, all right, folks, before the computer crashes again, let us wrap the show up. All right, so we got a show with Dan tomorrow. That is, I'm not sure who our guest is going to be yet because we haven't figured it out. But we'll have somebody on, I think. So I'll be on with Dan, and there may be another video coming out this week. Another thing that is on the immediate horizon is the interview with Dan Leader from Noble Knight Games that we were up there when we went up there a couple of weeks ago. Be very gentle on the sound quality. It is dreadful. But the interview was great. Dan is a great guy, and we were delighted to talk to him for half an hour or whatever it was. That's about how long the interview runs. So check out that video when it hits. It is already scheduled, and I'm about to tell you when it comes out. That might be Wednesday. That is Wednesday. That's when that comes out. So... and then there's more videos coming, but I have to actually do editing to make the other videos happen. This one's already edited. It was nightmarish trying to fix the sound levels. I didn't have an algorithmic way to do it that I trusted, so I kind of did it by hand, and it sucked. So I apologize for that. But, folks, this has been a pretty good show. We had, I'd tell you, but computer kept crashing. We had almost 200 people here tonight. So that is amazing. So I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight. Don't forget to like the video wherever you're at. So thumbs up on that. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. Once again, there's a whole bunch of ways to help the show out by helping us out via the links in the video description. Big shout out to the patrons of Ardwulf's Lair, as well as to our sponsor, Noble Knight Games. And we'll see everybody again real soon now.